How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video. I hope you're all doing well, having a good holiday season, getting to spend some time with your family, your friends, and hopefully you got some time to watch some movies too. I've been trying to continue to educate myself on some of these classics that I've never seen before, and a big one for the holiday season is Silent Night, Deadly Night. Now, Scream Factory just put out their 4K of the original, and my YouTube feed has been filled with reviews and videos on the series. And needless to say, FOMO kind of bit me pretty hard with this one. So I decided to dive deep and just go all in and watch all 6 movies in the series. So in today's video, I want to talk about my Silent Night, Deadly Night weekend movie marathon. I'll try to avoid major spoilers as much as possible, but the plot is really not the major draw of these movies. They're really just kind of dumb, fun slashers for the most part, and I think you can enjoy them even if you know all the major beats. I'll put chapters down below in the description, so if you really just want to hear my thoughts on a particular movie in the series, go ahead, skip around. And I think it'd be fun at the end of the video if I did a quick ranking of all of the movies in the series. So if that's all you're interested in, yeah, go ahead, skip to the end. With all that being said, let's get into it. Alright, starting off with the original Silent Night, Deadly Night. From 1984, directed by Charles E. Sellier Jr., and this was originally titled Sleigh Ride. So the story starts following the main character Billy and his family on Christmas Eve 1971, taking a trip to visit Grandpa in a mental hospital. Now, Billy is traumatized on this trip by his grandfather after he tells him that Santa not only brings toys to all the good little boys and girls, but he also punishes the naughty.
All the naughty ones. He punishes.
After this fun family visit with Grandpa, Billy and his family, on their drive home, come across a criminal dressed as Santa Claus on a murderous rampage. During the run-in, Billy witnesses his mother and father being killed by this man. So we skip ahead a few years and find Billy and his baby brother survived this incident, and they're now living at a home for orphans run by Mother Superior, an old nun who believes harsh punishment is the only way to remedy Billy's trauma. So a good chunk of this film is spent here on Billy's youth at the orphanage. Some might think that this is a slow start, but I actually really like this choice. And I like that we spend so much time learning about how shitty Billy's life is at the orphanage. If you're going to have a killer be the protagonist of pretty much the entire film, it's important that the audience can empathize with him. The director does a good job of this. And Lily Chauvin, I think is how you pronounce her name, who plays Mother Superior, does a stellar job making Billy into this anti-hero that you really feel compassion for. Now, after some time spent at the orphanage, the film jumps ahead again 10 years, and now after the jump, Billy's 18 years old, and Sister Margaret, who's basically this film's Dr. Loomis, and the one nun who shows compassion for Billy, she finds him a job at a local toy store. Now, Billy starts off great at this new job. He's really doing well. But when the holidays come back around and the toy store has its own Santa Claus in the store, Billy's past starts to creep back up into his mind. And when he's tasked with putting on the suit himself, he has a full-on psychotic break. And this is where the killing spree starts, and it really does rival a lot of the classic slashers in my opinion. There's a lot of memorable kills and some very unlikable victims. And the film really picks up and turns into a pretty fun ride for the rest of the movie from here on out. I don't want to completely spoil it, but my favorite kill happens a little bit later on, and it's involving a couple of bullies sledding. Billy's motivations for killing are basically him living out the warning that his grandfather gave him at the beginning of the film, combined with Mother Superior's teaching methods of punishing the naughty. The only other serial killer protagonist films I can think of are American Psycho and The House That Jack Built. I don't really count In a Violent Nature because he's basically a silent killer with no real character traits, and The fact that Billy is the main character really kind of makes this movie stand out, in my mind at least. But yeah, to the best of my knowledge, this was the first movie where the serial killer is the protagonist. You can let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. But yeah, that fact alone really makes this film unique to me, and I definitely give it extra points for that. I really enjoyed this movie, even with its super low budget quality. I think they were able to make something super unique on this super low budget, and it's also just really fun to watch. I give the original Silent Night, Deadly Night 4 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. Alright, moving on to Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, directed by Lee Harry and released in 1987. This one follows Billy's brother, Ricky, as he experiences his own psychotic break and goes on a murderous rampage of his own. I have to say, I really enjoyed the second half of this movie, but it's pretty nutty to me that they were able to get away with the first 40 minutes of this movie basically just being a retelling of the first one. And it's not even shot from Ricky's perspective or with any new footage or anything. It's all just flashbacks to the first movie with only short breaks in between where you see Ricky in a cell recounting this story with some sort of psychologist doctor. Now, if this movie was a standalone film, I think that would obviously be fine. It does a really good job of retelling the story of the original and just straight up cutting all the fat out of it. But if you've seen the first movie, you could basically just skip the first 40 minutes of this one. Once we get past all the flashbacks retelling Billy's story, things really get a little more interesting. So Ricky continues telling his story to this doctor, and we see a whole new slew of killings after the orphanage is closed, and he spends a few years with a new family. Ricky's psychotic break is triggered by him witnessing a woman being attacked in the same way that his mother was attacked in the original film. And we continue on with Ricky's story, killing at random whenever he's triggered by the color red and witnesses his victims being naughty. Now, we get some pretty unique, inventive kills in this one. There's one that I particularly like involving an umbrella, and then another one with a car battery. And it's pretty funny. A good bit of this is filled with a short-lived love affair. Um, and there's a fun movie theater sequence where the movie being shown is actually the first film, which is both confusing and amusing in a really kind of like meta Scream type way.
What did you say this movie was about?
Oh, it's great. It's about this guy who dresses up like Santa Claus and kills people.
What? I'm holding you up, asshole.
Now this sequence really had me thinking, like, is Ricky just an unreliable narrator? Because at this point he's still just recanting his story with the psychologist, and it really is just kind of like a quirky nod to the previous film. Spoilers for the later films in the series, but this isn't the only time that this sort of like meta thing happens. There are other films in the series later on where you where you see footage from a previous film on a TV. So Ricky finishes recounting his story with the doctor, and he escapes the facility he's being held in, and he goes on this mission to return to the orphanage and kind of extract his revenge on Mother Superior. And she is now disfigured and still crotchety as all hell.
Like your brother. You must be punished.
Now this ends up being the final showdown of the movie, and the direction here is awesome. This is just like a really fun slasher. There's maybe some homages to things like The Shining here, and it's just the end of the movie is great. I really enjoyed it. So overall, I think this is a pretty fun entry in the series. I like how Ricky is even more unhinged and over the top than Billy at times. And this movie is just not taken as seriously as the first one overall. And it's really just self-aware. It knows how goofy it's being. Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, Better Watch Out, directed by Monty Hellman and released in 1989, continues Ricky's story, but he's no longer our main character. And I got it in this pretty cool Vestron video collector's series that actually comes with part 3, 4, and 5. So now, instead of following Ricky in this one, we follow a new character, Laura, who has this sort of clairvoyant psychic connective powers, and she's being used in these experiments conducted by Dr. Newberry. In the aftermath of Part 2, Dr. Newberry has put Ricky back together, so to speak, in order to run these experiments. Ricky's played by Bill Moseley in this installment, and by God, I just really want to thank the art department for designing the look of his character in this one. The exposed brain bubble head thing with blinking lights and an antenna on it, or whatever that is. It's honestly one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a horror movie. Bill Moseley's awesome. I love Bill Moseley. And there's a really interesting interview in the special features where he talks about how he mostly remembers this movie for being the first time he ever cried on screen. So therein lies my issue with this third installment in the series. This is also talked about in the special features with another interview, but the director, Monty Hellman, kind of set out to make an art film and to bring deeper meaning and artistry to the film, and it really just ends up falling pretty flat. So this one is a bit of a slog to get through, honestly. Every time Bill Moseley is on screen, I'm captivated by his character design, but aside from that, it's really painfully slow. The score is just drab and boring. Laura and her brother are not interesting characters, and the film just takes itself way too seriously, in my opinion. It's a good idea, but just poor execution, and nowhere near as fun as most of the other entries in this series. If it weren't for Bill Moseley and the stellar character design, this film would absolutely be bottom of the barrel of the series for me. I'll leave you with the best clip from the film here, but don't get too excited. This really is the best 10 seconds of the movie.
Hey, follow it! Is it live or is it Memorex?
And now we come to Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, Initiation, directed by Brian Usna, who also did Bride of Reanimator and Society. This movie, in my opinion, is an absolute dumpster fire. If you were hoping for a return to the traditional slasher formula, you are in for a serious dose of disappointment. This is for sure the Halloween 3 of the series. It really has nothing to do with the previous 3 films, aside from the bizarre meta moment that I was talking about earlier, where you see a clip from Part 3 on a TV. Something about these moments, especially the movie theater scene in Part 2, is appealing to me, though. It's weird, it makes no sense, but for some reason I like stuff like this. So the story follows Kim, a reporter trying to prove herself at work by covering the story of a woman who falls from a building and was burnt to a crisp from the waist down. Her investigation ends up entangling her in a cult of witches and their plot to bring back one of the leader of the group's deceased daughter. Oddly enough, there is a character named Ricky in this, but he's not meant to be, or at least I don't think he's meant to be the same Ricky from the other movies. I think if he was, he'd probably have, a scar from that bubble thing. But anyways, yeah, so this Ricky is a homeless man working for the cult of witches, and he's played by Clint Howard. He really is one of the few kernels of corn in this turd of a movie. Now, there is one redeeming factor that this movie has that I could definitely see younger audiences appreciating, and that is that it kind of has some pretty interesting gender politics at play. In a way, the movie does have a female empowering message to it, which I have no issue with. I love the substance. I love stuff like that. I'm all for that kind of messaging in movies, but overall, this movie really does just stink. And we reach the final installment in the series, Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toy Maker. Now, this one is co-written and produced by the director of the last movie, Brian Usna. And again, this has nothing to do with the previous movies, but strangely, Kim, the main character from the last film, appears in this movie, or the same actress appears, and she's also named Kim, but it's unclear if she's supposed to be the same Kim. I really think that Brian Usna just enjoys fucking with his audiences, to be honest. So that actress that plays Kim, she does have a quick line of dialogue that kind of hints at her maybe being the same character. She says something along the lines of like, "You wouldn't believe the stuff that's happened to me." But as far as I know, it's not confirmed. And Ricky also appears hilariously, which makes absolutely no sense considering where he was at the end of part 4. Now, this one's going to be really hard to talk about without getting into some heavy spoilers, so I'm just going to put the sticker up for this one. I think this movie is worth watching, but I also think that having the plot spoiled for you is not going to ruin the experience. So, just warning from here to the end of this section of the video, I will be spoiling the movie, but I think you'd be okay and could still have fun if you haven't seen it yet if you continue watching. Alright, with that spoiler warning out of the way, this installment centers around Derek and his mother, Sarah, dealing with the death of Sarah's husband and Derek's supposed father, who's killed in the beginning of the movie by a possessed or booby-trapped toy left on the steps of the family home. Alright, now after the hilarious opening scene, we skip ahead in time a little bit and we see Sarah taking Derek to a toy store called Pedo's, and it's run by this guy named Joe Pedo and his son Pino. Now, if that reference kind of goes over your head, it's Joe Pedo and Pinocchio. So this really ends up being a twisted take on the story of Pinocchio. Big spoilers here, if it didn't smack you in the face with the biggest hint ever. His son ends up being a toy made by evil Joe Pedo. Now, a little later in the film, you find out that Joe Pedo pulled this bullshit in another town a few years ago from this other character, Noah. And Noah is another central character in the movie, and you end up finding out that he is also actually Derek's true father. And now Noah's kind of back to put a stop to Joe Pedo and his BS and swoop back in on Sarah now that her husband's gone. So this final installment in the series I thought was a pretty fun one. The whole Charles Band killer toy thing I think is awesome. If I had one major complaint though, I think it would be that there's not really enough of the killer toy stuff. You really only get like a bit of it at the beginning and a good amount at the end. It really kind of picks up towards the end. But yeah, overall, I think this is just kind of a fun, goofy horror movie. The plot is pretty thin, which is why I didn't spend too much time talking about it. But yeah, I'd recommend this one if you're a fan of stuff like Puppet Master or Krampus. Alright, so I didn't initially plan on talking about this 2012 loose remake, I guess you would call it. But I thought, when it comes down to ranking these, it might be fun to throw this one in. It might be like throwing a wrench into the rankings. So yeah. But also, yeah, just to let you know, before my weekend marathon, this was actually the only one in the series that I had seen. And I pulled it off the shelf, and as you can see, my disc was missing. So I ended up watching this on Tubi. So if you're interested in watching this one, it is streaming for free on Tubi right now. Alright, now this 2012 remake was directed by Stephen C. Miller, who's kind of just known for doing a lot of like straight to DVD, straight to streaming, kind of macho action flicks. But recently he put out Werewolves, the new Frank Grillo movie, and I'm kind of interested in that one actually. I've heard some pretty good things about it, so when that one drops on VOD or streaming, I'll probably check that one out. Now, if you know my taste in movies, this might not come as much of a surprise to you, but I actually really enjoyed this movie. It has this really grimy, dirty, gritty kind of post-Saw, Hostel, 2003 Texas Chainsaw remake feel to it. The cinematography is pretty good, and it has this kind of like high shutter speed aesthetic to it. If you know anything about filming, people tend to put the shutter speed on higher when you're filming things like sports and like action type stuff. So it gives this kind of like choppy look to it, but it really helps the action sequences out. And the director, I think for the most part, like throughout most of this movie, they use that high shutter speed look, and I think it works for this movie, especially considering it really is like just a straightforward slasher. You get a lot of kills in this movie. It moves very fast, and I think that visual choice works pretty well for this one. If you're explaining this series to someone who's never heard of it before, and you only have a few words to do it, I think the most straightforward way to explain these movies is they're slashers where the killer is dressed up like Santa Claus, at least for most of these movies. And I think out of the entire series, this 2012 remake definitely fits that description better than almost all of them, maybe aside from the first one. Now, like I said, this film is very straightforward. The plot is basically just this Santa Claus is terrorizing this small Midwestern town while the local sheriff, who's played by Malcolm McDowell, and his deputies kind of hunt him down. It's pretty much as straightforward as they come, but there are some good kills, and it's just a well-made modern take on the franchise. There's not too much to complain about, but there's really also not too much to praise here either. I'd recommend this one if you're into, the 2000s era of gritty remakes, like Friday the 13th and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Okay, with all the quick reviews out of the way, let's get to the fun part and rank all 6 entries in the Silent Night, Deadly Night series, and I'm sure nobody on the internet will disagree with my rankings here.
Number 6.
Alright, coming in at number 6 on my list is Part 4, The Initiation. I really just don't like this movie that much. There's no slasher elements, there's no Santa killer, and I'm just not really into witchy, culty movies, to be honest. So, in general, yeah, this one is just bottom of the barrel for me.
Number 5.
Coming in at number 5 for me is Part 3, Better Watch Out. As much as I like Bill Moseley and the design of, the clear bubble head thing, this one was just kind of a slog to get through. It has some good ideas, but the execution just wasn't there. I feel like there is a good movie in here somewhere, but it's just too slow for me.
Number 4.
And coming in at number 4 on my list, I have Part 2. Now I think if Part 1 or the original never existed, this might be my number 1 on the list. I love this version of Ricky, and it feels like they pack the most into this one. But the problem really is just the first half of the movie is just a retelling of Part 1, and it still just kind of baffles my mind that they were able to get away with doing this. Like I said, it kind of pains me to have to rank this one this low because I do love this version of Ricky, and the movie theater scene is awesome. The umbrella kill and Ricky's kind of terror through the suburbs I think is awesome. But yeah, overall, I just can't forgive it for, just retelling the first movie for the whole first 40 minutes of it.
Number 3.
Alright, number 3 on my list is the 2012 remake. Now, this remake is just straight up slasher, and I think sometimes simple is better. It hits all the notes that I think most people enjoy about these movies. If you're just looking for raw killer Santa action, this is probably the one for you, coming in right behind, the original.
Number 2.
Alright, number 2 on my list is Part 5, The Toy Maker. Even though this one deviates pretty far off the beaten path, I think the goofiness of the killer toys just speaks to me. I love the campy stuff like this, and the twisted take on Geppetto and the Pinocchio story is such a cool idea. I really don't even care that there's, not really the whole killer Santa angle in this one. I think it stands on its own as just a fun, campy holiday horror film, and I'm just down for it.
Number 1.
Alright, and yeah, you probably could have guessed it. Number 1 on my list is going to be the original. I really considered placing Part 5 here in my number 1 spot, but when it comes down to it, the original really is the best. It has just enough of the over-the-top gore for my liking, and the filmmaking of this really is just a step above the rest. The fact that you get to learn about Billy's backstory and they really make him a character that you feel sympathy for makes this more than just your average slasher, especially for the time it came out. Yeah, number 1, it's got to be the original for me. Alright, there you have it, folks. Every single Silent Night, Deadly Night movie ranked and reviewed. I had a lot of fun watching all these for the first time, aside from the remake, which I had already seen before, but it was fun revisiting that one too. Let me know in the comments if you like these movies. What's your favorite? If you have a ranking, what's your ranking? And yeah, I hope everybody has a happy and safe holiday. And yeah, thanks for watching the video. I'll catch you in the next one.